You could trash anyone or anything in the world of sports. You got 30 to 40 seconds to do so. Rob Parker, who did you trash today on Deadspin?
I'm doing a bigger one than that, Chris, because my trash is bigger because I have to trash my BBWAA brethren today. I really do, Chris. I think we have lost sight of the Hall of Fame.
So this whole segment's going to be a trash talk.
Yes.
Okay,
because
here we go.
Because I'm really bothered by it. All right, do you want to set it up or no? We'll just go straight.
Well, I mean, Scott Rolen makes it to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Third baseman, 8 Golden Gloves, which is, that's nice. Played 17 years, 7-time All-Star. Not bad. 281 career hitter.
Not bad.
That's okay. 316 homers, 1,200 RBI. Look,
not bad.
The standard, the bar's been lowered. I mean, he had a solid career. Once finished 4th in MVP race. Typically wasn't in the MVP race. A couple other times, 14th, 24th. I mean, I guess that's what constitutes a Hall of Famer these days.
Okay, go ahead, rub it in. And you know what? My wounds
I'm going to rub it in because you always talking about the Basketball Hall of Fame and how anybody can get in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Tracy McGrady. Scott Rolen on his best day wasn't half of Tracy McGrady. Stop it.
It's hard for me to push back and argue today because today was one of those moments. Chris, you know where I am with the Veterans Committee and Fred McGriff and other guys have gotten in through the back door, Alan Trammell and whatnot. And I'm right. Harold Baines. You remember Harold Baines was a good player, Chris. Very good DH with the White Sox.
Absolutely.
He wasn't a Hall of Famer. Scott Rolen is not a Hall of Famer.
The names you mentioned, and I know you got a rant, so I'm going to be quiet in a minute. The Harold Baines and Alan Trammell and these guys and Scott Rolen. It's almost like, Rob, anybody that you kind of remember, oh yeah, Alan Trammell, did somebody that had name recognition back in the day is getting in. I mean, because Harold Baines, you're right. We all knew Harold Baines. So even casual fans knew Harold Baines, a good player, but he wasn't a Hall of Famer. No. Alan Trammell, same thing.
This is where we are. And today pushed me over the edge because I really believe this is such a stretch. Scott Rolen is not a baseball Hall of Famer. When you talk about the great players of the game, Chris, there's no way you're saying Scott Rolen and Reggie Jackson, Scott Rolen and Willie Mays, Scott Rolen and Babe Ruth. And, and Hank Aaron and Tom Seaver. I could go through the list. We have really made a stretch. And I think you're right. The standards have been dropped in the Baseball Hall of Fame. To really sit up there and think that Scott Rolen belongs enshrined in Cooperstown. Chris, it's a hollow place. I love the place. It gives me chills and goosebumps every time I go. It means something to me. I told you this. I have no kids. I'm divorced. I got a great car, but guess what? My Baseball Hall of Fame vote is my most prized possession on this earth. Chris, you know that. I've said this numerous times.
Yep.
It means that much to me. I take the job very seriously and trying to put in the right people, and I'm not. Everybody has a right to their vote, and they can vote for whoever they want. And most of the time, I think the writers have done a great job. The issue comes in with the Veterans Committee, Chris, most of the time, where people are being let in through the back door because they like them, because they have a name recognition, or because they play for some team that people like, okay? But in this case, it's hard for me to think that his first year on the ballot 6 years ago, Chris, he received 10% of the vote. If he would have got 5%, his name would have been off the ballot. You need at least 5 to stay on.
Right.
He got 10. How do you go from 10 to 76 5 years later? His numbers haven't changed. What's
got better.
changed?
He got better.
He got better?
I don't get it. I agree, Rob. That's something. And I'm not saying it should be one and done.
Well, Chris, why not? And let me say this. Why not? In this standpoint.
If they're going to have a limit, and does baseball have a limit to how many?
Yeah, you get 10 votes a year.
So if you're going to have a limit, that to me would be why not.
Okay, I say unlimited, one shot at it. Because things don't change. So there's no restriction. If there are 8 guys who are really great players who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, you should vote for those 8 guys. If there are no guys, this was a year, Chris, where we're going to have a 0. And we've made the Hall of Fame. It's a big ceremony. It's a big TV show. There's a lot of money that's attached to it. They don't want to have nobody. Right. And I get Fred McGriff is going to be inducted through the Veterans Committee. But what kind of draw would you have at the Hall of Fame if it was just Fred McGriff?
Well, I don't know that Scott Rolen going to make it much
more
agree. Of a
draw. but that's where we are, and I think that's why people start looking and they're changing their votes. I think the writers who change their votes, I think it's ridiculous because to me, Chris, if I vote for you the first time, I'm going to vote for you the entire time you're on the ballot. And if I didn't vote for you, I never vote for you.
So you've never voted for a guy like second, third, fourth year, whatever like that.
Because either you're a Hall of Famer or you're not. And here's my argument. And this is what I live by. If I have to debate your career, you're not a Hall of Famer. I think it should be of that ilk, Chris, when you say Hank Aaron. Is there a debate between me and
Hank, you went to the absolute top.
Okay, but I could say Ken Griffey Jr. I can give you other names of people who either have 3,000, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera. I can give you names of people who either have 3,000 hits, the all-time save leader that have, and I'm not talking about steroids or that's a gray area. Right. I'm just talking about if you have the numbers or you won awards and there's no debate about your credentials. Here, there's too much of what are for a guy to never win the MVP. Curt Schilling was everybody said, oh, he didn't make it because he's conservative and Republican. Not true. Mariano Rivera is like the biggest Donald Trump supporter ever, Chris. He got in unanimous. So that wasn't held against him.
Right.
It was because Curt Schilling never won a Cy Young. Those awards matter. Scott Rolen, you just mentioned it. He was in 4th place once for MVP. That's not a Hall of Famer.
Right. Yeah. You make a very compelling argument, Rob. And look, Sheffield was on the list, right?
I only voted for one person.
Numbers dwarf Scott Rolen. Dwarf him. And I know there's the rumors and stuff about Sheffield with the Stewards. I assume, Rob, I don't know if a lot of people might just have thought he's not a Hall of Famer, but how can you think Scott Rolen's a Hall of Famer if you don't think Gary Sheffield is?
Because they believe he worked out with Bonds and he had that clear.
So that's what you.
That's what they're holding. Yep, that's what they're holding against him. He's 10 times the player of Scott Rolen. Gary Sheffield had 509 home runs. Chris, one of the few players in baseball history who has more walks than strikeouts. You know he had a great eye at the plate.
Right. Yeah, it's a bit strange. I'll tell you that. It is a bit strange, but
how do you think to fix it? What would be your I'm saying,
Rob, that's a good question because once you let a guy like Scott Rolen in, then what? I mean, seriously, like it's not fair to a lot of other players that were better than him that you may not think are Hall of Famers either. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you keep them out once you put and I don't want to sit here and act like Scott Rolen was trash and all that. He was a good player.
Nobody's saying that. Absolutely right.
But Rob, I don't know how you fix it. He's in now. And he will be used as a standard.
Yes, absolutely. 100%, Chris. That's the danger of it because now it's going to be, oh, wait a minute. Todd Helton, who didn't make it, he had 72%. Chris, another guy. Todd Helton, a 5-time All-Star. They're ready to put him in the Hall of Fame. Hey, Andrew Jones, who batted
Right.
254, Chris. Oh, Andrew Jones should be in the Hall of Fame. He had 10 gold gloves. He batted 254 career. Really? Now that's when you're starting to water down the Hall of Fame, and that's the danger of it. Baseball's Hall of Fame was always the hardest to get in. I can't say that anymore. I have no argument anymore.
I would guess, Rob, that there are guys from back in the day. Now, I'm not saying a lot, but I'm sure there have been a few who back in the day who, you know, you wouldn't think were Hall of Fame worthy that got in. Would you agree with that? I don't know the names, but I'm sure there's probably a guy here or there that you might look back and say,
But I'll tell you, Chris, and you might be right, a couple of them, but I'm telling you, most of the questionable guys got in through the Veterans Committee, like most of them. When you question, you go, how is Phil Rizzuto, the old Yankee shortstop, how is Phil Rizzuto in the Hall of Fame? Veterans Committee. How did Pee Wee Reese get in the Hall of Fame? Veterans Committee. Like, I can go through, there's a list where you would question, and that's the reason when they started doing that, by letting other people in. And now the writers have bought into this too, where they've put in a number of players, Chris, on their last ballot, like their 15th. Like that's what's the new thing is like, and now it's only got 10 years on the ballot. So now when you get to the 10th year, people didn't vote for you the whole time, and then they vote for you the last year.
Yeah, that's kind of strange.